Hey there, content creators. Christopher here, and today I want to talk about what I refer to as the 3 E's of filmmaking in the new era of content creation. That is the edit, the economy, and exploitation. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's cover economy first. We're going to get to editing and exploitation. And by the way, exploitation may not mean what you're thinking it means. You're probably close, but there are some variables, some details that I think are worth discussing. So we're going to cover that. But first, I want to talk about the economy of content creation. So if you're like me, you're working with very limited budget. At the moment, my space is my garage, and I have a green screen over here, partially covered up by a black sheet for some other reasons that I won't get into now. But essentially, I'm finishing up one movie at the moment, and that's The Quantum Terror. I'm currently working on the Foley for that. We're going to do some voiceover. We're going to do some other musical arrangements to really pump up the production value of this movie that has only cost me, well, I won't go into the specific budget, but it certainly hasn't cost me what a general, even micro-budget film would generally cost. And that's because I really paid attention to the economy of this film. I shot around what I had available. I had certain cameras that I had this Canon 7D, which by today's standards, I wouldn't recommend shooting any feature film on. I now have the Blackmagic Pocket camera, which is a wonderful 4K low budget, not a DSLR, a cinema camera that is, I mean, it's wonderful. You can shoot a movie on that and it will look good. I'm having a lot of issues based on the footage that I shot here, but here's what I did. I made it part of the style of the project, and that's perfectly fine. Now here's kind of the caveat. What I find is that a lot of filmmakers will look at how cheap their project is, and they'll decide not so much to make it a style, but to actually make it a talking point. They're drawing attention to it. And there's a difference between drawing attention to how cheap your film is versus making it a style. Making it a style is figuring out what the limitations are and working with those in a way that is interesting. And part of that comes in the edit, but I'm going to get to the edit. First, we're going to talk about kind of the drawback. What I see is people go, oh, wow, we don't have a lot of money. We don't have the best quality equipment. We don't have the best actors. And therefore, we're going to make it something silly. Now, sometimes this works. I was really impressed with the short film Kung Fury, which actually is very tongue-in-cheek. Actually, I think we're working with a fairly decent budget. They brought in some very talented people. The director is a martial artist, and he knew what he was aping. He really made a great film. You get things like Turbo Killer, which evolved into Blood Machines that you can watch on Shudder. These are low-budget projects that play into kind of a Grindhouse style, which I particularly love. And maybe we should talk a little bit about the Grindhouse style as well, because Grindhouse was a period of filmmaking where the film stock wasn't always the most expensive. You had grainy film with scratches, and the color wasn't always the best. But they made do with the edit and the exploitation. I'll get to that sort of thing. But what I see a lot of people doing is going, well, my movie is really cheap, so what I'll do is I'll just make fun of myself. I'll make fun of how cheap it is. And it comes across in the end as self-deprecating. And a lot of times what people forget to do when they're doing that is be entertaining. they're kind of just going, aha, look at us, you know, we don't have any money, and you know, our costumes are dumb, and therefore we're going to really ham up that aspect of it. Well, people kind of catch on to that. They catch on to the self-deprecating aspect, and they are really not interested because they're still showing up to be entertained. So no matter what the economy of your project is, you have to remember that you're there to entertain them. Kung Fury was very entertaining. Turbo Killer, very entertaining. I still haven't seen Blood Machines. I have to get a Shudder subscription because Blood Machines looks awesome, and I really think that that's going to be a big aspect of what the future of video on demand and content creation is becoming evident in projects like that. At the moment, I don't have a lot of money to spend on. I can make a choice. I can put the money towards my personal projects, or I can put the money towards video on demand. Maybe if my Patreon subscribers, you know, maybe if I get more of those, by the way, Patreon, link in the description, I will be able to comment more on some of the great video on demand stuff. But there's fantastic video on demand things that we have access to right now. Even if you don't, I have an Amazon Prime subscription. Even if you don't have that, there's still free ones like Tubi, and there's another one I'm thinking of. They're out there. If you've got a Roku or a smart TV, you can access some of these apps. And of course, people are putting stuff on YouTube all the time. Anyway, so getting back to that, look, really don't draw attention to how cheap your project is. Embrace how cheap your project is. Embrace what the limitations are and work with those in a stylized way to tell a story and be entertaining, but do not, under any circumstances, ever deliberately draw attention to how lo-fi, low-budget your project is, because once people see that, it's like they're seeing you be self-conscious about it. And if you're self-conscious, that's kind of a form of embarrassment, and they'll feel that, and they'll feel embarrassed with you, and they'll feel uncomfortable, and they'll turn you off because they don't want that. What they want is somebody who's confident with what they have. If you're making a movie using cardboard props, make them the best cardboard props that you can make, and that there are ways to make your cardboard props not look like cardboard at all, or foam, or your green screen, whatever it is. Embrace the limitations. Show them how well you can work with it. Show them how adept of a craftsperson you are, and present them something entertaining that they'll embrace. Because how many times have you gone to an art gallery, or if you haven't been to an art gallery in a while, because a lot of people haven't, how many times have you seen a YouTube viral video of somebody did something outstanding with just plastic bottles or cardboard? They do amazing things and it goes viral. People love it because of that confidence, because of embracing the flexibility of the material and the limitations, and showing you that they can create something wonderful from that. So that's the first E. That's economy. The second one is the edit. I cannot stress enough how important editing is to your film, to your content. It is vital. And if you are a director, you have to learn to shoot for the edit. Now, this is something that I really want to dive into for a moment here, because a lot of times people worry first about how good are my effects, or how good is the acting. These are all important things, by the way. How good are my props? How good are my locations? All of these things are things that you want to think about. Of course, you want them to be the best they can possibly be. And if they're limited, you want to be able to make the most out of them that you can. Well, that really is where the edit comes in. And you will find that once you've shot everything, there will be something missing. Some pickup shot you should have done. Maybe a bit of dialogue got left out, whatever. And then you will have to get clever. You'll have to rearrange things. Or you may find, you need a close-up when you didn't get one. And you think, I didn't get one. And then a lot of people will they'll do without. One of my favorite examples of a fantastic edit is in Young Frankenstein. There is the scene where they have to give the sedative to the monster, and they needed an insert shot of Inga kind of gasping, and they took it from another completely different scene, and it wasn't a close-up, so they had to blow it up. So it was it looked soft, it looked blown up on the screen, but they didn't worry about it. They didn't have to go and reshoot it. They just blew it up, and because it was edited in so well, the audience forgave it. I don't even think they noticed it. Most of them didn't, or if they did, they just kind of, shrugged it off, whatever. Because the edit was done so well and they were caught up in the moment, it worked. So I really want you to think about shooting for the edit, and if you miss something, I really want you to think first about, does it flow? Does the story flow? Does the energy and the pacing keep going? If you can answer yes to that, then chances are your audience is going to forgive that thing, and you won't have to go back and reshoot, or you won't have to do without and have maybe a story that is not as fulfilling or a bit jarring. So don't worry so much about the quality of certain shots if the edit flows properly and it keeps the audience engaged and entertaining. You'll find that they forgive a lot. That seems like a strange bit of advice. It seems like saying, like, well, it seems almost counter to the other thing. Like, don't draw attention to how cheap your project is. But in fact, what you're doing is you're drawing the audience's attention away from everything but the story. You're keeping them engaged. And I think that works really well. And what you'll find is some of the classic movies that we love so much, there are moments where the blue screen work isn't as good, or an effect shot looks dated, but because the story is still really engaging, you're not worried about it. You see the odd thing, and you kind of maybe subconsciously note it, but you're swept up in how great the story is, and it works, and people still consider those movies classics. I especially think that shots out of some of the Indiana Jones movies come to mind, where it's very obvious. I think there's a scene where they threw a guy out a window of a blimp, and he lands in some luggage, and he turns around and he shakes his fists at the blimp as it's taking off, and it's very obviously a blue screen shot. The way he looks does not match the blimp, which is a miniature, but it's no problem at all. So people will forgive a lot as long as that edit keeps them engaged. So I think that's the next thing that you need to keep in mind. So the third thing, which I said I would explain a little better to you, is exploitation. Now, people think exploitation, I don't want to exploit people. That sounds awful. Well, in this day and age, people worry too much about that. What exploitation means is not exploiting people, it's just exploiting an aspect of what your film is. And this is actually something that I think most people need to keep in mind when making low-budget content, because we're not shooting an epic novel, we're not shooting a play. We can take aspects from a novel or a play and put it on film, but we have to remember that films are very singular in what they're promising to the audience. For the most part, there are always exceptions that prove the rule, but you have to think, why is the audience showing up for this film? I just took my daughter a few months back to see the movie Underwater, which was essentially a knockoff of Alien. But and the quality, a lot of people talked about how the script wasn't that great, or the characterization, or blah blah blah. I thought it was just fine. I actually thought it was very entertaining, and I thought that it was a good piece of exploitation film what was it exploiting? It was exploiting what it promised. It promised underwater monsters. Some people complained it wasn't scary or the characterization could have been better. It wasn't why we were showing up. There were some jump scares in there and that sort of thing. But I think there is a difference between people showing up for monsters and people showing up for scares. And this was a film that knew its audience, and so it exploited the monster aspect of the film. I thought the actors did a pretty good job, and we didn't need a bunch of time building up characterization. Would it have made it a better movie? Debatable. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. Maybe we're not interested in that. Maybe we're just there because we're there for the exploitation factor of these monsters. And, characterization can add to that. But first and foremost, you have to deliver what you promise. So exploitation is just going down the line. What are we promising? Are we promising, is it going to be sexy because there are sexy exploitation films? Or is it going to be violent? There are very violent exploitation films, and that falls into gore exploitation or exploitation of special effects, exploitation of explosions, essentially. And again, there are exceptions to this, but movies for the most part are singular, and you should be thinking, what is my exploitation factor? What is the hook that's getting them in? And once you have them in, you can tell any story you want. You can put in any amount of characterization you want, as long as you are remembering that you promised something and you need to deliver on that. So even if your script isn't that strong, the exploitation factor, if you deliver on that promise, will actually satisfy your audience enough where they may forgive that the script isn't so strong. They may forgive that the effects aren't that good. But if you, again, embrace the economy of your film, presented a good edit, and delivered on that exploitation factor, you will satisfy your audience. I'm pretty sure about this. And yes, there are people going to argue we need higher quality movies, we need better scripts, we need more characterization, all of that stuff that I talked about, and I agree with that. But that's up to the artist. And if you have your audience and your audience appreciates those things that you bring to it, then you'll do great. But you have to keep in mind those other things. You have to deliver on those things first. Everything else is just icing on the cake. Look at The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian is kind of disjointed. There's some filler episodes, but overall it's solid. And it's got that exploitation factor. It's delivering on Star Wars, the spirit of Star Wars that the fans love. And I think that's one of the big reasons why the Disney sequel Star Wars movies did not work. It wasn't because of the terrible scripts. I mean, it was because of the terrible scripts. It was because they forgot the core values of Star Wars that Lucas had always exploited. And that's what exploitation means. And Lucas, pretty good at it. The script, there are problems with it, but overall the story was pretty good. And it embraced the technology of the time, which even then had its limitations. He was pushing boundaries, and thank you, Mr. Lucas, for that, because without George Lucas, by the way, a lot of stuff that we do at home, we wouldn't be able to do. You can thank him for pushing that technology in a direction that it could become consumer. But yeah, the next time you watch a film, think about these three things, especially a low-budget film, especially a Roger Corman film or a Canon Films film. And by the way, on Tubi, I mentioned Tubi, there is a couple of great documentaries right now about exploitation filmmaking. I forget what they're called. One's The History of Exploitation, and it's got John Landis. And then there's also a really wonderful one about Australian exploitation films, which has Quentin Tarantino in it. So go to Tubi and search those, see if you can find them and check them out. They are actually really wonderful. So that's all I'm going to say for now. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? The economy of your film, the edit of your film, and the exploitation factor, the 3 E's, that's what I'm calling them. And I think I thought a lot about this and came up with that. It's pretty much what I think about all the time when I'm creating my films. And there's nothing wrong with exploitation. There's nothing wrong with embracing the limitations of your film. There's nothing wrong with embracing the fact that movies are singular. It's like people say, books are about what people are thinking. Plays are about what people are saying, and movies are about what people are doing. Well, if you've got people in movies doing too many things all over the place, it's going to make your movie feel disjointed, and that edit is going to be far more difficult. And people are going to go, when am I going to get what I showed up for? The exploitation factor. So that's all. Thanks for watching and listening. And be sure, if you haven't joined my channel already, to subscribe, like this video, hit the bell for notifications, share this video, leave a comment. I want to know what you think, like I said before. Please check out my other material, because I've got great interviews with film professionals, special effects artists, actors, directors, producers, much more commentary on the future of filmmaking and content creation in the post-COVID era. So let's keep this conversation going. I'll be back soon with a lot of the other videos I've been promising, as well as I'm going to talk a little bit more about Dune. I did one Dune video, and I've really been thinking about the book. I've been rereading the book and wondering, is this actually going to be a good movie? The trailer looked beautiful, but there's a lot to talk about in that book that I don't think is going to actually translate cinematically. So I'm going to record a video about that. You'll probably see me wearing the same shirt. By the way, if you were in Hollywood in the 90s and you know about this shirt, I will be shocked even if you were in the Hollywood goth scene. But I'm wearing this because it is the month of October, which is the month of Halloween. So happy Halloween. And you guys all have a good one. I'll be back with more discussions on content creation very soon. Thanks.